Okay, thank you everybody for joining actually this late afternoon and this very early morning actually from all my friends all around the world. I'm really happy to see many of you actually dropping by. And so I could say even a Zoom retirement meeting is probably much more efficient than actually traveling all of us by plane. Although I'm looking with envy to the post-COVID era so I can at least travel again. So the loose ends of my CWI career, that was typically a title which you just pop up when you have to think about, well, I have to say a few thank you words. So the loose ends, and those who know me, well, if you don't constrain me, I can talk about this for ages. So let's not do it. So let's just give you a little actually synopsis of actually the loose end. And for that, I would like to go back to 1985. In 1985, I was hired by Cor Bayen, the then director of CWI. I just had finished my PhD and they say, Martin, come over to CWI. Here are 2 PhDs and here's the research landscape. Please go and have fun. Can you imagine today that you would be hired on a permanent contract on day 1 after your PhD and have 2 PhDs to work with? No way. So that was indeed a perfect time. The goal was very simple. Do what you like, do your research, go ahead. And you can do it actually until you retire, because that's the consequence of a permanent contract. Retirement. Almost at an age of 20, who would think about retirement already at that stage? That's somehow has association with, okay, retirement means you stay along here until you can rest in peace. That somehow is the hidden message of such a message when you're young. Now, luckily, time progresses. So by the time you are 40 and you have done your first work, your PhDs, some duties, you at least know that there is another challenge. You would like to reach the point where you can recreate in peace, not bounded by government fights, financing fights, PhDs, but yes, there will be an end to this tunnel, that you can start playing again. And yes, when you're about 60s, there it is, the open window to the barren landscape of research. I can play again, explore again. So I jumped over the tombstone, at least so far. And what's on the tombstone? Well, 45 years of playing around with databases. Yes, it started a decade before I even actually visited and joined CWI. And yes, it got some credits. Yes, I agree. I won't repeat that. But is there something to learn about? Or perhaps can I give you some of the hints? As you have seen today, data management is an extremely broad area, from hardware to languages, from application to innovation. So there is a lot to be done there. So it's not one certain topic. So people could say, yes, you work for 40 years on one topic. It's not true. It's an umbrella topic, which has many different things. There was one motivative assumption. In all that time, I tried to actually challenge assumption from the past, and I would never take solution for granted. And that can be illustrated with, of course, the database management system products. If you look over the last 30, 40 years, they all had the same ingredients. ACID, OLTP, all about SQL, row store. Cost-based optimizers, really the best thing we ever invented in the world. Execution engines. And we teach it, our students. The first, second, 30 users, even Peter and Stefan will now teach their students, these are the cornerstones of database technology. If you know this, you will actually become famous, and to this you may even get started in a company and go after Martin and beat him on the stock market. But in science, there is another rule. If something is taken for granted, then actually that's the agenda for doing research. So by that time, actually, you have PhDs, you challenge them with actually taking a completely opposite approach. Get rid of the storage layout, do something completely different. Cost optimizers, the heart of most relational database engines, forget about it. You don't need it. And actually, it's a dead end. It may take another 20 years to reach that point, but it's a dead end. So it's this attitude, thinking complementary what is known, actually is the basis for doing research. Challenging assumptions from the past is the pathway to the future. And I was very pleased that a few of these people who joined me on this quest actually are gathered here in this meeting, Peter, Stefan, and Niels. Since 1995, we worked on actually carving out new pathways. And I find myself very pleased that we have been working for 25 years together. Can you imagine actually research institutions and groups which have such a long and strong relationship? That's really a blessing, actually, I really enjoy. And yes, it took many years before we got our first good results. And yes, it took a lot of time that others recognized that we were groundbreaking the stuff. So thank you, Peter, thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Niels, actually. Without you, we would not have been here at this nice occasion. Of course, like any family, we all go our own paths. So Peter, of course, at some point stepped up and said, well, goodbye, MongoDB. Let's do Factorize and some other stuff. Stefan, of course, actually is looking into the scientific world and trying to get a handle on that one. One of these guys actually was even more adventurous than these two. That was Niels. Because he actually last year decided after 20 years at CWI and have a permanent position until his retirement, Martin, I'm coming with you. We're going to make the MongoDB company great. That's power. That's actually guts. I really appreciate it. So let's step back a little bit about the PhDs. The PhDs, 25 PhDs I had. At some point, I also wanted to give them some Dutch research wisdom. Now, and those who know the Dutch a little bit, we know we have these Delft's blue porcelain tiles. It's centuries old stuff, which we still make money, especially with tourists. And one of the items we do with this Delft porcelain tiles is that we put wisdom on them. And so this is an example of a wisdom which I gave to my students, often writing it on the whiteboard and say, if you're building software, and especially complex software like a database system, please avoid doing as much work as you can. Don't make it more complicated than strictly needed. Others would say, KISS, that's the best you can do. Keep it simple, stupid. Well, avoid doing hard work. Well, and if you cannot avoid it, which of course may happen, then there is a second rule. Actually, if you build software, make sure that in your software system, you do never the same thing twice. And even current database systems have a lot of these bits and pieces of code where they recalculated things. The most important one is indexing. Indexing is being recalculated all the time. Even worse, query optimizers. Gee, you think that every query is unique in the world? Forget it. Actually, people are very stubborn and actually they formulate more or less similar queries. So why the hell would you try to start fresh every time over and over again? Okay, fine. Of course, there are points where you say, okay, forget everything you're doing and you go into the whiteboard. And that brings me to the most glorious moments of my career. My door was always open to the PhDs. They can always jump in and challenge me something wild. And then we ended up the whole afternoon scribbling on the whiteboard, doing things which have nothing to do with the PhD track. Holger and left terrorists know these kind of intense discussions we had on topics which actually had little to do with building a database engine. These were actually the moments when I tried to step out of my comfort zone, and I also challenged my PhD to step out of their comfort zone. But that does not only amount to PhDs. Even I am challenged actually repeatedly to step out my comfort zone. And for those who want to know what it may mean, there is an URL so you can see how far I can leave my comfort zone and to even write something about it. The loose ends. The loose ends. Well, we already wrote a number of those about 10 years ago. A research agenda actually for the next decade. And as Stefan indeed identified, that was a challenge. Because I wanted to write a paper which had no recognition of any research at all, no reference at all, and just carving out a landscape of possible research areas which are rich enough to have at least 4 to 5 actually PhDs getting a PhD on that. The last one in this whole series is data rotting, or as I have published it a year ago, we need databases with dementia. Of course, I would like to avoid dementia as long as possible, but I think that the database system should, in the kernel, be able to forget data in order to cope with all kinds of resource issues as well. So there are tremendous amount of actually research opportunities, even in this sketchy landscape. I was extremely pleased to notice that this afternoon was complemented by the talks of Natasha, Gerard, Gustavo, and Patrick, because I looked slightly different to actually their contribution. Not necessarily on the topics, which were good, challenging, but they demonstrate something else. I think they demonstrate an asset of good scientists. And certainly assets I would actually convey to new students. If you want to have a PhD advisor, find one who is energetic, find one who is flexible, find one who is innovative, and one who knows to teach. And I think with this package is actually, in my opinion, would carve out the good scientist for the future. So thank you, speakers of this afternoon. I really enjoyed having you around here and celebrating this afternoon with me. CWI. Yes, Corbeil lured me into CWI, and CWI is like an oase in the jungle or the desert, actually, where people are fighting about science funding. They are driven by hype terms. It's an oase. You can do your work, you can play, and you can actually charter the future. Of course, it comes with some consequences. If you are an institute as long as I have been, you end up into management. And so, yes, Peter, you are in the management team already for some time. Don't worry, it only took me 17 years to get out of it. And yes, you're expected to help actually raise funds to make the institute alive and kicking. And also you would have noticed that in one of the bad parts of management teams is that you're essentially locked up in a room. And if you sum up all the hours of a year, it amounts to 1 month of jail every year. Gee, what could have been hacking around in that 1 month and not being in there? But that's the duty. We indeed actually have to contribute in this area. The database architecture group, as I told you, it started out with 2 people. 2 people, and it grew over time, and this is just one picture taken in one of these years. It grew to about 20 people. If I would actually summarize all the people I have worked with or interacted with over the last 25 years, I can't probably all remember them. One thing for all of them, I would really thank all of you for the fun and the cooperation we had actually in all these years. It really made my life. And MongoDB is not dead. Absolutely not dead, as one of the recent PhDs claimed on his defense that MongoDB is an old-fashioned system which should rest in peace soon. Well, he actually ignored me because I'm not planning for that trip yet. I will continue the MongoDB story. And I'm really pleased that I can do it actually with the 16 people around me, a strong and dedicated team. And most importantly, Jenny, Niels and Sjoerd, which together actually we form actually one of the most powerful teams to get this off the ground. Probably not for an IPO. I don't matter. Let's keep MongoDB an open source, well-funded and maintained piece of software. Now, of course, all this actually wasn't possible with actually the support of the family. And over the many years, the family around me has grown until actually 5 grandchildren now. The latest one at the bottom is only 6 weeks old, that's Maurits. So there is quite some spin-off. And then you have seen my cat. He is always the wise cat next to me, actually keeping me on track, or actually he is asking for food, but that's normal. But last but not least, of course, my beloved spiritual wife, Lonneke, who actually is a sunshine in my house. And she's capable actually to keep me on track, but also she's able to get me out of my comfort zone into her spiritual world. And if you're interested in what that amounts to, just type in Lonneke Kersten on YouTube to understand how far that goes. With all this small talk, there's only one thing left. I would say the story will be continued. So see you in 10 years' time from now. Thank you for all.